Hey out there, rock and rollers. This is the 100th episode of the Ugly American Werewolf in London Rock podcast, and I want to welcome you. This is Mac B, the Wolf, your host, and I will soon be joined, as usual, by my co-host and partner in crime, Gary Action Jackson from the East Coast of the U.S. And I got to tell you, this is a very proud moment for us. Not just getting to 100 shows, which is a bit of a milestone. I mean, we do a weekly show for 2 years. Yeah, eventually you're going to get to your 100th show. And obviously not every show makes it that far, some by design, but some by the fact that that's a lot of work. It's a lot of dedication, and not everybody is up for it. And I'm just fortunate that I am, and that I have a friend and a partner in Jackson who's also up for it, who is always up for talking rock and roll, who wants to have that at least once a week opportunity to get away from work, get away from the wife and kids, get away from the worries, and talk about music that we love and have passion about. And so we're proud to bring you our 100th episode, and we're proud that it's an episode on a really special night for us. And it was the night that we went to see Nick Mason's Saucerful of Secrets on tour in Indianapolis. And as most of our listeners know, we are part of the Pantheon Podcast Network, a network of about 100 different shows, not all about rock music. Really, there's something out there for everyone. And we do like to give shout outs to our friends that we've either had on our show or maybe we've been on theirs, like Paul Stevenson of Vintage Rock Pod and This Day Rocks, like Christy Alexander Hallberg of Rock is Lit, like Jay Scott from The Hook Rocks, and like Tom and Zeus, the Kiss Kings on the Shout It Out Loud cast. But Pantheon was a sponsor of Nick Mason's Saucerful of Secrets tour, giving us the opportunity to not only spread the word about the tour and send our podcast hosts as reps to the shows to kind of spread the word about our podcast, but to interview members of the band. Now, we didn't get to interview Nick Mason, but a few of our cohorts did, like the Imbalanced History guys, like Mistress Carrie. But we were fortunate enough to interview Guy Pratt and Gary Kemp, who we love because they have a killer podcast, the Rockonteurs, which is huge in England. As I've lived there for the last few years, the Rockonteurs are all over the top of the podcast charts, and I definitely recommend you checking them out because it's very conversational. They're talking to people they know. They're talking to people that they have admiration for. Sometimes it's their heroes. And it's always people that they have something in common with. You know, they've been through this. They've been working musicians. They've been actors. They've been touring, you know, they've worked in music or they've worked in studios, they worked on the road for a long time. So they don't just ask the normal reporter questions. They can ask questions that really kind of get to the heart of what they're doing. And that was episode 96, so hopefully you will check that out. And of course, I did get to see these guys in London earlier this year. Saw them at Royal Albert Hall, basically sat on the stage. That was show number 75. It was popular as well, so I encourage you to check that out. And if you really want to hear more Pink Floyd, I do think episode number 69 or so was Momentary Lapse of Reason. And our third show ever was Delicate Sound of Thunder, both the film and the record. Very big to us. And of course, that featured Guy Pratt. So you might want to go back and check out those, Pink Floyd fans. But this was special because Jackson and I went together. And Jackson and I, although we went to some great shows together in college, we had not been to a concert together since 1994. Since the Rolling Stones on the Voodoo Lounge tour right around Thanksgiving, 1994. And it's not because we had a falling out. We just grew apart. We lived in very different areas of the world. And we lost communication for a while because we never were on social media until we did this show. And finally, we did reconnect because he moved close to where I go in Florida when I'm on vacation in Florida. So we just started to see each other again. And then this show was born out of COVID, born out of, I got to connect with some people back home while I'm living in London and I'm stuck in this little basement apartment and I don't know anybody here and I can't go out and do anything. That's really where the impetus from the show came from. And we'll talk about that a little bit on this show. So it was great to be able to go to a show featuring Nick Mason and Guy Pratt, who were in Pink Floyd when I saw them in 1994 in the same place that Jackson and I saw the Stones, Tampa Stadium. And really, relive some old memories, but see just a killer show with great seats provided by Pantheon and Nick Mason, and we really, really appreciate that. Also, as a special feature on this show, Pantheon Podcast has been giving out a VIP experience to folks at every stop of the U.S. tour, right? So if you enter on pantheonpodcast.com, you can win some goodies, t-shirts, lanyard, or a necklace made out of cymbals played by Nick Mason, but you also win a couple of front row tickets. And our winner, Heather, was at the show, obviously. She had a great time, drove 3 hours each way to get to the show. And so we feature a little snippet with her talking about her experience in Indianapolis as well. Now, we have to mention, we are super proud to have sponsors rarevinyl.com sponsoring us here. Amazing synergy for a rock and roll podcast. They have over 250,000 items in stock, folks. And it's not just rock and roll, but it's mostly rock and roll. And so if you're looking for that first edition Pink Floyd record, or maybe I saw a killer Japanese red vinyl One of These Days single from back in the day, if you want to pick that up, go to rarevinyl.com and use code PODCAST, PODCAST. You can get 10% off not only your first order, but all your orders going forward. They have an amazing rating from Trustpilot. They ship all over the world, and they take incredible care of this stuff, not only once they receive it, but in shipping it out to you. So check out rarevinyl.com, use the code PODCAST. You can also go to EIL.com, same company, use that code, get 10% off everything. So it may not have been the easiest trip for me to get there. It was a little bit of a planes, trains, and automobile situation. There was a very real possibility I wasn't going to make it at the last second. I was starting to become despondent. But at the end of the day, it all worked out. I got to Indy. Jax and I went there together. We worked the Pantheon table. We got to see all the VIPs come in. And we got to see Nick Mason's Saucerful Secrets with killer seats right in the middle, maybe 5 or 6 rows back. A lot of fun. Different experience than it was at Royal Albert Hall, just because I was front and center instead of way on the side there. And I think you'll enjoy what we had to say here. So thank you to all of you for tuning into our 100th episode. It's been a lot of fun, and trust me, we can do a lot more than 100. We've got a lot more in store for you. We've got a lot of exciting things on the horizon. But this one's a special one. So buckle up. It might be a little bit long, but you don't have to listen to it all at once. Just settle in. It's going to be fun hearing me and Action talk about Nick Mason's Saucerful of Secrets live in Indianapolis, right here on The Wolf. Our 100th episode, Jackson. Can you believe it? In less than 2 years, right? I mean, we started this in November of 2020. Here it is, October, and we've gotten to our 100th episode. It's kind of amazing.
They said it would never last. It is exciting. It is exciting because then you can tell people, oh, you got a podcast. Oh, well, how's that going? Well, we just recorded our 100th episode. Really? Well, that sounds like something now, other than, we've got 3 or 4 in the can, and we've been doing it for 5 years now.
Right. No. I mean, here's the thing. When we started the show, I knew that we could do this a long time. I know that you and I have hundreds, if not thousands, of conversations about rock and roll that we can have. It's just a question of, can we do it in a way that makes sense? Can we organize it in a way so that every week, there's something out there, whether it's an album that we love, or it's a show that one or the both of us got to go see, or we, getting to interview our childhood heroes is a pretty big deal. I mean, to be honest with you.
Right. And I know when we started, I talked to a guy who his wife actually does a podcast, and he's like, well, 90% of these fail, and because, people you just don't stick with it. Right. And so I kind of, it made me a little nervous, but then I'm like, no, I think we've got this. I think we can do it. I think we've got the, like you said, the content. It's just the getting it all worked out. And I'm glad that we did, even though sometimes it's a little wacky with one time or the other.
Well, and it took us a little while to figure out the technical side, how to get our sound decent. And I have to thank Pantheon Pods, our mothership, the network that we're proud to be a part of, for helping straighten us out on a few things. Not to mention trying to bring some advertising revenues in and sponsorship opportunities, interview and guest opportunities as well. But I mean, for me, that was kind of the big thing was, great, we're going to be part of this great network. Can they make us sound better?
And it is nice, too, because we have gotten access to some guests that we never would have on our own, and very excited to talk to them through Pantheon.
Yeah, and of course, talking about Guy Pratt of Pink Floyd fame and Gary Kemp who's probably most famous from Spandau Ballet, but they're both part of Nick Mason's Saucerful of Secrets. They're also the hosts of the Rockonteurs, an amazing podcast that was really an inspiration for us as well. Not that we're fantastic and famous musicians who then can transition into talking to their friends and heroes on a podcast, but just to hear them every week, just because they don't just ask reporter or fanboy like us type questions, although they can be fanboys to some of these guests that they have sometimes. It's more of conversation with people who have been through a lot of the same stuff.
Right. And it is interesting to have them talk to them as, not just fans, but as counterpart or contemporaries. That's the word I'm looking for.
There you go.
Being out on the road, being with, oh, you played with this. Oh yeah, I was in the band from this time to this time. And I knew this guy, or I was at that party. Yeah. It really is it's a great show. They work well together, and you could tell going to see them live, they have a genuine friendship, and they like to be around one another.
Yeah, seeing them live when they're out there, like, touching feet during the song, they're just kind of being silly, and it's like, let's get up in each other's face and give each other a look, every once in a while.
Yeah,
I mean, you can tell it's keeping it fresh, it's keeping it fun, and it's look, they do 6 straight weeks on the road here in the U.S. I think they did 3 months or more in Europe, this spring and summer when I first saw them at Royal Albert Hall, which was show 75. And our conversation with Gary and Guy's episode 96 has been pretty popular, and you should probably check that out. But being that Pantheon sponsored Nick Mason's Saucerful of Secrets tour I thought it was a really big deal, right? Because, podcast carriers usually don't get to sponsor tours, especially tours like Rock and Roll Hall of Fame members and things like that. So when Pantheon announced we're going to do this, I'm like, oh my God, what can we do to be a part of it?
Right. Yeah, I remember when that came out, and was like, yeah, pick something. It's too close not to be involved somehow.
Exactly. And we even talked about having Guy on in our 3rd show when we didn't even really know what we were doing still. But we figured out, okay, we need to talk about something we know and love. So we picked Pink Floyd's Delicate Sound of Thunder, both the movie and the record, to talk about. We went in depth on all the members, and we talked about Guy on the Rockonteurs and how great it would be to have him on the show. Pantheon helped that come true. So once we found out, well, you can also go to a show, work the booth, help get more folks interested in Pantheon, meet the VIP winner, which is an incredible deal in every city. At least city in the U.S. I don't think it happened in Canada, but every city in the U.S., Pantheon was giving away a VIP package that included all sorts of goodies, but probably most importantly, 2 front row seats to the show. And we're going to talk to our winner, Heather from Indianapolis, who we got to meet at the show. And then we talked with her briefly about her experience, which will come up here a little bit later on. But to be a part of that, and not only for us to be, to meet Pink Floyd fans and to go to this killer show and to have great seats, but to meet someone who's like blown away, a huge Pink Floyd fan who had this once in a lifetime opportunity to be up close to her heroes and have a seat to an amazing night.
And it was really cool to go. I mean, we got in early because we had to get set up and see the people come in. There were older people there. There were younger people there.
There were some, yeah.
And there were at least 1 or 2 sets of obviously parent and child. One of them, I think, looked like a teenager. The other one was really tiny. I mean, this kid couldn't have been more than 7 or 8 years old. And you could see the look on the dad's face, like he couldn't wait for this kid to hear the music. And the kid looked excited. And yeah, it was a fun night. It was great to see everybody out. And it was great to go to a live show with you after how many years?
I mean, I think we figured it out that it was 27 or 28 years since the Stones' Voodoo Lounge that we last saw a show together, because we just haven't lived in the same town together in a long time. And we had those years where we kind of grew apart when you were in Texas and I was in Louisville and just didn't get together for anything. And so that alone made it pretty special. It's like, oh, you guys went to a lot of shows together. I'm like, well, yeah, from 91 to 94, we saw a few. And then I continue to go to a lot of shows. I just didn't do it with Jackson, So.
Right. Yeah, it was a great night. I'm glad all the stars lined up, but the beginning part of the story was kind of an adventure story.
Yeah, there were forces conspiring against us getting together for this show. It was conspiring against me getting there. And I guess I can give you some of the rundown of that. We chose Indianapolis because when I come to America, I come to Florida, and you're not too far away in Georgia. And we generally
Right.
see each other when I'm in America. So I'm like, all right, well, if there's any Florida shows or an Atlanta show, something like that, we'll pick one of those. They didn't really hit the South. I think they hit maybe a couple places in Texas, but they didn't really hit anyplace else. So we kind of had to find a show where it would make sense for us to go. And we chose Indianapolis because it's only a couple hour drive from Louisville. I know that we have listeners in Indianapolis. Plus, my wife was working in Chicago that week. So it'd be easy for me to, okay, I will fly to Chicago with the wolf cub. I will give her to her mother, and then they can go have a beach vacation while we go to Indianapolis for the show.
Correct. Now, wait, hold on a sec. Let me jump into this real quick because everything was planned meticulously. I had plane tickets. You had plane tickets. Everything was fine.
Car reservation.
Correct.
Hotel,
the whole 9 yards.
That's right.
I get on the plane in Jacksonville. No problem. I fly to Jacksonville International Airport, which apparently means I didn't realize that Atlanta was international because that's the only place you can go from Jacksonville.
True.
I switch planes. I sit down in my comfortable first class seat, which not really, but I can close my eyes and pretend I'm in first class. Where I get a text from you saying, we've got in all caps, huge problem. And I say, could this go any other way? What's going on now?
Of course,
and take it from there.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm in Amsterdam and I'm flying with my daughter, and they warn you, look, Schiphol is a mess now since COVID. We haven't been able to get the people in here to work, and you're talking about lines out the door around the block. And I'm like, okay, let's get there early because I don't want to deal with that. And it's coming up on their fall break. I took her out a couple days early so we could kind of travel without all that nonsense. And I think I'm pretty glad that I did, because within an hour of getting dropped off in the cab, we made it through checking our bags. We made it through security. We made it through customs, and we were in the lounge, like having some breakfast, like within an hour. I'm like, okay, that all worked out really well. Then the flight was delayed by about an hour. Now, this did not really bother me because it's a direct flight to Chicago, and we were sitting first class. Like, we had the chance to lay down in Delta One and all that kind of stuff.
Very nice.
Pretty nice. And so even we got on the plane, like, okay, we're just going to be delayed another half hour. I'm like, so what? I'm more comfortable here than I am in the lounge. I got movies. I'm watching the Elvis movie. I'm like, this is great. Kid's going to take a nap. It's going to be fun. All right. So it's a little bit delayed. Kind of have to expect that a little bit. 8.5 hours go by. We fly in, no problem. We clear in Chicago at O'Hare. Not a big deal. We get in the car, super nasty traffic. So it should have taken about 25 minutes to a half an hour. Took an hour and a half. And I hate
welcome back
to the
USA.
USA just running as smoothly as ever, right? But still, it's not a big deal. So we're in a car for a while. I'm glad to be back in America where I can read all the signs. They're all in English, and I know where I'm going. And we have a nice night out. I take her out for a nice Chicago-style pizza. First time she's ever had a little deep dish Chicago pizza in Chicago. So I'm like, all right, that's a good experience. Now we'll get back to the room. My wife was working. She's actually working at the Soldier Field that night. So I'm like, all right, I got my daughter. I'm going to get her to sleep. We're going to get up early. I'm going to take off for Indy. They're going to take off for the beach. After I take a shower, she's basically asleep in my bed. I just kind of sit next to her. I'm like, all right, I'm going to read through some emails here, maybe do some social media, try to get psyched up for tomorrow. Get a note from United. Your flight has been canceled. And I'm like, uh-oh, that's not good, because I'm pretty sure it was the last flight out. Turns out there's really, on a Saturday, no, this is a Friday, I'm sorry, there are only 6 direct flights from Chicago to Indy. Now, I guess that's because a lot of people drive between Chicago and Indy. It's really not that far. Mm-hmm. But, you figure there's got to be flights from Chicago to Indy, for business. You got to get down there in an hour. It's got to happen. Well, there's 3 on United. There's 3 on American. Mine got canceled, and all the other 5 were completely booked up. It's like, well, you can go sit on standby. I'm like, okay, but what if I don't get on? Then I'm at the airport, and there's absolutely nowhere for me to go. And so I started looking at other flights that maybe could take me somewhere. I saw a Southwest flight that if I'd gotten there at 5:30 in the morning to Midway, it would fly me to Dallas. and then fly me to Indy. And I'm like, you know what? I'm not even considering that. That's ridiculous. I'm not doing that.
Right.
Delta had one that took me from Chicago to Minneapolis and then to Indy, which would have gotten me there by like 5:30 or something like that, 6 o'clock, which would have maybe gotten me just in time for the show. I'm like, no, I'll rent a car. No problem. You can rent a car one way, can't you? Well, since COVID, you really can't. They just don't have the cars, and they just don't do that anymore, especially on such late notice, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I checked every normal one, like Hertz, Avis, Enterprise, all those. I even checked like fancy, like I'll rent a Porsche to go down there, like a nice rental, place. Like, I don't care if it's $200, I'll do it. Nope, not even an option. So, all right, I love to travel by train. That's the way we do it in Europe. Let me jump on Amtrak, no problem. Nope, there are 0 seats from Chicago to Indianapolis all day long. I'm like, okay, bus. There must be a way to get on a bus. I go to Greyhound, and they even send me to something called Flixbus, which I don't ride the bus a whole lot unless it's like around the city. I don't take like intercity trips on the bus. So there's this nice service called Flixbus with a big green bus. Like, okay, yeah, we can take you from Indy to Chicago. There was 1 seat left. And I'm like, I will take the 1 seat left. Gimme. So I took it. And then I rested after 2 hours, just freaking out. I was like, oh my God, this isn't going to work out. Everything I've been planning for months, this dream come true, going to be our 100th show. This sucks. And then I'm like, okay, you know what? I'm going to make it. It may not be, first class in the back of a limo. Doesn't matter. I'm going to make it. Everything's going to work out. Here's the thing. Flixbus doesn't have a bus station like a Greyhound or something like that. So they just kind of pick you up on the side of the road. There's no sign that says Flixbus here or anything like that. So I got there an hour early, as I like to do when I've never been someplace before, and just check it out. And I'm like, this can't be right. They've taken me the wrong place. And I walked around the block several times. I asked a couple people, like, no, that's actually it. You just sit there. And I was really nervous until other people started showing up. Mm-hmm. Then, of course, the bus was 30 minutes late. Then, of course, it was an hour late, then finally it arrived. I'm like, okay, great, So it was kind of a dichotomy, flying one day, first class, all the free booze and movies and everything that I want. And the next day being squeezed onto a bus, with a bunch of people, many of whom don't speak English or, that kind of thing. But, hey, it all worked out. And it was the stop in Indy was a 15-minute walk to the hotel. So I walked right in.
That was the part that worked out well after everything that didn't. And yes, and I was checking back in with you because my whole thing was that for the schedule, it was going to work out no problem. Right. Now, if you ran into traffic, that was going to be a problem. So that was in the back of my mind, like, is this going to work out? So you checked in periodically during the day, and first it was late by an hour. And then there was a little bit of traffic, but not too bad. But yeah, you ended up making it just in time. Came in, changed like a trooper. Yeah. Then we were back out to the venue.
Straight out to the venue. Yeah. And of course, we hit some traffic. And on 65, I've never been on 65 when there was 0 construction, especially between Louisville and Indy. But, on the north side, between Chicago, of course, we hit some of that as well. And I don't know. Look, it's all the planes, trains, and automobiles adventure of getting to the show. But I'm like, no, damn it. This has to happen. This is really important to me. And I mean, as many shows as I've been to over the years, I'm like, this is one that I really want to do. A, because you and I were going to go together, like we said, for the first time in 27, 28 years. And B, we have interviewed this band. The guys who've been on stage, we're talking to them. Not to mention, we're doing a job for Pantheon where they're representing the network.
Right.
Meeting and greeting our VIP winner and looking to spread the word on our shows, And I'll say it was nice to have a few people come up to us, including one young kid. I mean, he looked like he was in college or younger, and he liked rock and roll archaeology with Christian Swain, and he vowed to check out our show as well. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, and there were a couple other people who showed some interest. I think they maybe were new to the podcasting world, and hopefully we turned some people on. We had the QR code that you could scan to win the giveaway. So
The
that was
library
fun.
of rock books.
Yeah,
Yeah.
correct. And it was fun to interact with people. And it was cool to feel like, I mean, we walked in there, we had our tickets, we were not technically in the VIP, we weren't in the VIP for the VIP experience, but we got to get in early, we set up, we, perhaps got to hit the merch tent a little bit early, which was nice.
Yes.
Yeah, so that was fun. And yeah, just put everything together because, like you said, when I was on the plane and you said the flight was canceled, I'm like, this has to happen. It has to happen some way. We can't just say, well, forget it, this isn't going to go.
Exactly. So we just kept the faith and kept pushing forward, and we made it, thank God. And then we got to meet Heather, our VIP winner. And we'll talk to her a little bit later in the show. And what happened also in the VIP, and we say the VIP area, really it was a table behind which, I think it was Chad was his name?
I think so, yeah.
Who was helping all the VIP people out, because you could buy VIP tickets, but we obviously had a VIP winner, and that was Heather. Right. But Lee Harris came out at some point just to say hi, and I'm like, that's not Lee Harris, is it? No, it can't be him. He just looks like him. He's somebody else with the band, maybe some kind of road manager or something. But it was absolutely him, and he just celebrated his 50th birthday. So we didn't go over and say hi, but we were closer to him there than during the show. And it's just, I don't know, it was just an interesting time there. And to see everybody filtering in, like you said, lots of old people like us and older, but there were some younger people. There's some Pink Floyd fans, because everyone's going to hear not just Dark Side of the Moon and The Wall and Wish You Were Here, but they're going to hear metal at some point, and they're going to be like, this communicates to me. This is going to become my favorite band.
And I know one of the things that we'll talk to Heather about here in a minute is the big draw on this one was the addition of echoes.
Absolutely.
And you can hear when they played that, which we'll get into, but I mean, you can see how that was kind of the beginning of the next age of Pink Floyd, of the Wall, of Dark Side of the Moon, these epic pieces that they would put together. So it was interesting to see kind of the beginning of that, and to go back and see the Syd Barrett stuff and how the band really started.
Yeah, I mean, Gary even talked about that when they were on our show. He's like, it was really the decision to do Echoes because it is such an epic, whole side of an LP, 20 plus minute song. It is what kind of set the standard for what Pink Floyd would become in the 70s and even into the 80s with this amazing sound and these long songs. And it was a bit of an undertaking and daunting from what he said.
The real difference is obviously introducing echoes into the mix. And it took a lot of thought, a bit of daring. There were conversations had about, should we take this on? It was a little bit more purple, as they say, those lines in Shakespeare, like to be or not to be. It's called a purple line. For an actor, it's quite intimidating because so many people have got opinions about it. And I think introducing echoes into the mix was one of those tracks. And we decided to not completely ignore the version David did which Guy played on, go back to Metal, have a listen to that, find the sort of pastoral element of that track, and approach it in a much a way that was contemporary to Metal album. It's one of the highlights of the show, one of the highlights of my musical career, playing that song.
But no, let's go ahead and by the way, Close Hall. I had never been to Close Hall. It is on the Butler University campus, north of the city, maybe a little north, even west of the city, in a very, very nice neighborhood. Usually when I'm in Indy, you go to the Murat Theater, which is downtown, which is pretty close to where we stayed.
Okay. Yeah.
They have a big amphitheater, which is up like on the north side, which is another maybe half an hour or more north. And usually if you're from Louisville, it's the difference between staying the night and going home. Like if they play Murat, or they play like with a Pacers player or something like that, then you can drive home in usually less than 2 hours. But when it's on the north side and what used to be called Deer Creek, and then it was called Verizon, and it's had a bunch of names,
right? But
it's a big amphitheater. That's talking 2.5, 2:45. That's usually when I go ahead and stay the night when we're staying up there, So, but Close Hall, it was nice. It was huge in that maybe it didn't have 3,000 or 4,000 seats, but it was so tall. It was like cavernous.
Yeah, I think it looked like it had 3 stories to it,
Mm-hmm.
from what I could see. Yeah, it was a lot bigger than I thought it was going to be. Yeah, very nice. It looked relatively new. I don't know what when they put it first started with it. Yeah, I mean, it was really nice. It was like it was the reception area when you walked in was nice. They had, stuff for what was coming up. It looked like it was pretty much every night of the week. It looked like it was going to be used. Yeah, real nice place. Yeah, not the Murat, like you said, downtown, but still a really nice venue.
No, and the sound was very good. The sound was
Mm.
killer. I mean, it's set up for music and for concerts, and they do a lot of different stuff there, I know, but it's well designed to make everybody sound good. And it was a great night for the sound.
Absolutely. And just a nice place to be also. Like I've been to venues where you're like, ugh, this is it's old and dumpy, but you're there to see the show. I remember I went to see this had to be like 98 or 99, the Cult in Roseland Ballroom in New York City.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that place was going to collapse that night. I'm like, wow, this is old. They haven't put a lot of money into it. The show was great. The venue was not. I can't say the same thing for this. Great show, great venue.
Yeah, and the people, like the ushers, they're all really helpful, really nice. All that was good. So no, we went and settled in. I mean, and we're in like the 6th row, something like that, and in the center. So I'm going to compare a lot of it to the Royal Albert Hall show that I saw in the spring, because it was amazing that I kind of sat on stage almost at Royal Albert Hall. All the way to the right, though. I mean, I was kind of right face to face with Gary there, maybe 7 or 8 steps away from him.
Just staring at him.
Yeah, but I did block. I was blocked from Nick's face for most of it. Couldn't see Don Beacon that well. And though I could see Lee, he's pretty far away from me. And Guy is kind of in my way to see Lee, to be honest with you. So this show I liked. I mean, look, there's advantages and disadvantages to where you sit. It was amazing to be that close and to be eye level with the band at Royal Albert Hall, but to be straight ahead front there so you can see the stage, you can see all the lights and the colors going on behind them and see every individual clearly what they're doing. I think I like this experience even better.
So when you were at Royal Albert, did you get to see the backdrop?
I could, absolutely. Okay. But again, there's a big light thing in my way, and I had to look to the side to that. Like looking straight ahead, I can see Gary and Guy, and then there's Lee over there. I had to kind of turn my head to see that stuff. Whereas, it's very much a part of. I mean, it's always been part of Pink Floyd's show, not only the sound, but to have this kind of psychedelic things behind it, right?
Yeah. That did add a lot to it. The lights and the what they were projecting in the back. So I could see, if you couldn't see that, you were missing out on a decent part of the experience.
Part of the show. Yeah, I totally agree with that. Yeah. So we get settled. We're totally psyched. And they start, the same way they did, I think, pretty much this whole tour. They start with One of These Days, which is killer. It's a killer way to start. It is one that I was familiar with from back in the day because it was on Delicate Sound of Thunder.
Right.
And but it's got that 6 slide, that kind of pedal steel slide to kind of start everything off. And it's a rocket way to start a show.
And it gets you into it, like you said. The first time I ever heard it was on Delicate Sound of Thunder. And I had heard the Momentary Lapse of Reason stuff, but then like, well, what is this? Yeah. And it was so cool. And to start the show off, like the part that Guy was playing on the bass, I didn't even know the bass could go that low. I mean, it was hanging.
Doing,
yes, yeah. I mean, it was the part. I mean, it was hanging on the ground. It was so low. Yeah, it was really cool. And then Lee comes in with the slide, which I didn't know what he was going to do, but he did actually have a pedal steel slide, and that was cool to see right off the bat. Also,
that's killer. Yeah, it was great. So that's just a killer way to open the show. So now we're rocking. Now we're psyched. Mm-hmm. Then they get into Arnold Layne, which was, of course, one of their first kind of singles. And it was recorded at that place that we saw on our tour, Jackson. That was the old dairy back in the day. And like Eric Clapton lived right down the street. And Steve Clark basically died, I think, right down the street from there. But what was cool to me was when we had Guy and Gary on the show, and I talked to him about Arnold Layne, because Gary sings it. Gary's a huge David Bowie fan. And when I was at the show in London at Royal Albert Hall, after they do the number, Guy stops and says, the last time that was played, on this stage. I was here. I was with David Gilmour, and David Bowie came out and did it. And it was basically his last public performance. I think Guy mentioned that he did some kind of charity event in New York, but everyone has seen that clip. And so like that was a big moment for you, Gary. But Guy kind of had a revelation there. He's like, when David was singing it, and of course he did it perfectly. He knew the song inside and out. He put up two fingers, two to know. And it made him realize that the protagonist, or the person telling the story, knows what Arnold's up to, because he's a dirty bastard himself, right? Like grabbing girls' underwear, you know, off the clothing line or whatever. And then he said in our interview, like, I worked out a way to hit the bass, to still play it, and I can put up that number 2 as well. And then during that song, he did it. He put it up. He's just like he said he did in the interviews. I'm like, well, that's cool. That's a fun little twist to this.
I'd like to have one thing here, which is what was interesting when Bowie turned up to do that song is you know, because David Gilmour has always said half jokingly, no Sid, no Bowie. And what was interesting was when Bowie turned up to do that song, he knew it inside, outside, upside. It was like he'd been singing it every night of his life. And in fact, he did something in it which made me completely reappraise the song. When he sings the line, two to know, and he held up his fingers like that in the peace sign, but meaning two people, which suddenly makes you think, two to know, I'd never really thought about that line. Of course, it's basically saying that the protagonist knows it does the same sort of thing as Arnold. To the point, I've actually worked out a way to play that on the bass where I can actually do that as well when I'm singing it.
Yeah, it was great to see that, because that's really what this show is all about. It's kind of a love letter to Syd Barrett and where the band started, and a lot to Rick Wright too, who we'll get into a little bit later. But to go back to the beginning after one of these days was great. And like you said, remembering the tour where we saw where they had recorded it, and that whole day that we spent together with the cab driver in London, it was just a cool way to. And I think, wait, was that? No, it wasn't. That wasn't close to the power plant. We also went to the power plant, the Animals power plant. That's day.
Right, Battersea Power Station, which now you can buy a condo there if you've got the bread.
And live with Sting.
They've turned it. That's what they've turned it into. I believe it's open now. Yeah, but no, that was a fun day. Yeah,
yeah.
But then they got into some songs that, although I know them now, these are not songs that I heard very often. Fearless was the third song. And again, I didn't grow up hearing Fearless, right? This is one they play on classic rock a lot.
Right.
Obscured by Clouds, I knew a little bit. But this run of Fearless, Obscured by Clouds, When You're In, Candy and a Currant Bun, it really kind of showed the different textures, you know, some Syd stuff, some stuff of before them, after Syd had left the band, them finding their way and kind of seeing, are we a pop band? Are we a psychedelic band? Like, what's going to stick to the window, right?
Yeah, and again, that's where we're at here, as far as seeing how the band started. Like you said, finding their way. What are we doing here? Are we, obviously Syd was the genesis of the band, and he had a lot of ideas, but then, you know, other guys started to put their stuff in, and they started writing songs together. And it was interesting to see that kind of unfold. But again, you know, then you go back to Vegetable Man with Syd, and it's just like, I can imagine they're like, what is this? No, it's cool. It's Vegetable Man. Let's
Vegetable Man, where are you? And obviously, I didn't know that song, because I don't even know if they laid that down. Weren't they saying that? I think Nick came out and said Pink Floyd never played it. Maybe they never even recorded it. And so Saucerful of Secrets are the owners of that song now.
Yeah, it could be correct. Even though it was technically written by Syd. Yeah, I think that's what he said, is they never actually recorded it.
But then, we transitioned into If. I like this song a lot, and I thought Gary sang it very, very well. And then there's a reprise, right? So it's If, then there's Atom Heart Mother, which is kind of got this big jam in it, and it's fairly well-known Pink Floyd pre-Dark Side song.
Right.
And then it goes back to If, the reprise. So it's kind of that dichotomy. It's kind of this sweet, you know, kind of wondering, dreaming, if, you know, this could happen, if I could have this. Then you get into the heavy Atom Heart Mother, and then you kind of come right back out of it.
Yeah.
It's a fine line that they kind of balance on that one, I feel like.
And it was interesting to see too how the you know, you were talking about how Gary was singing the song. It's interesting because, you know, Nick did some crowd work.
Right.
Which It's interesting because I'm sure when they do Pink Floyd stuff, or when they did Pink Floyd stuff in the back, I don't believe he ever got to address the
Nope.
crowd. So it was cool for him, and he was just, I mean, very, very calm. Again, one of the elder statesmen of rock, and he was pointing out how he introduced the whole band, but he pointed out how Gary Kemp went from New Romantic to prog rock god,
Right.
and like, yeah, but he really can play these songs well and sing. And you were talking about Spandau Ballet. The big song for them was True, which I actually heard over the weekend. I was on the 80s, Essentials channel on Apple Music or
Nice.
whatever.
Yeah.
That's totally not what this is.
Well, right.
all.
I mean, it's like,
Yeah.
that's all the guitar in that, really, And so,
Correct.
and the British press is notoriously kind of nasty, and they're all like, who knew that Gary Kemp was such a good guitar player? I'm like, what? I don't know. The millions of people around the world who bought his records, the fact that he's been doing it for 4 or 5 decades, did that kind of give you a clue to it? But it's not what he's known for. It's not his style, right? Now he's a heck of a guitar player and did some really great stuff, David stuff and Sid stuff. And he has a lot of toys there.
Yeah.
He looks great. He looks like a rock star. He is, he does a great job with this stuff. So it was cool to see that. But going to the next song after If Remember a Day, again, this is not one that I knew super well, but Guy came out and introduced it. And I guess it was one that Rick had written about, being a kid, and then you grow up and childhood memories that you need to kind of hold on to and stuff like that. And I know from what he said on our show that it's got to be difficult emotionally for him to sing Rick's songs, which he has to do every night, in that not only was Rick his bandmate, but Rick was for a while his father-in-law and is his son's grandfather. Of course, Rick, passed away way too soon, and that's just got to be emotional for him every night.
Yeah, and it sounded to me like from our interview with him that even though the relationship with his daughter didn't go on, he always had a special place in his heart for Rick. They always had a great relationship, and it sounds like Rick and the grandson had a great relationship too. And he talked about the grandson being at one of the shows and him singing that. I'm like, yeah, I don't know how you hold it together every night. I understand you're a professional musician. I get that. But the fact that you can do that without, I mean, I'm sitting there with a tear in my eye, like, oh man, how did you do this? But the other interesting thing too was, going back to the Dark Side of the Moon and The Wall, you kind of forget that, once Waters took over, you forget that, the other band members did write songs. They were creative, and not that they didn't during that time, they contributed, but to have this song written by Rick Wright and performed is, again, you're keeping the original material out to people. Like you're
keeping it alive.
You're reintroducing. I didn't know a lot of these songs that well until they put this thing together. I went back and listened to them and kind of,
that's right,
I wouldn't even say rediscovered, but discovered them. So I'm glad that they're doing this, because had they not, these songs would kind of get lost to history.
Absolutely true. And Rick, look, we've talked about on the show before, Rick seemed to be the Derek Smalls of the band. He's the lukewarm water, between the fire and the ice. He tried to keep everybody pretty chill. And when they got back together after Roger left, and technically, legally, it was just David and Nick, or the members, quote unquote, of Pink Floyd. He came back to the band and didn't put up a fuss that he wasn't, a quote unquote member, or didn't have his name up there and all that kind of thing. They did write it for the Division Bell. But then when David went out to do solo tours and he went out with Guy, Rick came with him.
Right.
It didn't have to be David Gilmour featuring Rick Wright, or didn't have to be David and Rick. He just wanted to sing and play the songs that he helped create, and do it with David and with Guy, obviously. So it wasn't just those 2 Pink Floyd tours that they did. He also got to tour with Guy with the David Gilmour band for all those years. And I think that just kind of helped solidify the relationship as well.
Yeah, it sounds like they did have a genuine friendship, and I'm glad that they kind of righted the wrong of him being leaving the band, coming back, reuniting with everybody, not Roger Waters, but everybody, the rest of the band, and they could go from there. And I'm sure that Guy has some great memories of those shows, getting to play with his father-in-law.
Absolutely. Now, here's a weird segue for you.
No, right?
I don't think I ever told you this. When we were moving to London, when we were still in the US, I had a dream that I sat down in a pub with Rick Wright in London. Well, and outside of London, because there weren't huge buildings everywhere. This is more like a small town, like a burb on the outskirts of London or somewhere in England.
Okay.
Cool town pub. And we sat there having a drink. And it was also one of those things where eventually I realized I'm dreaming, because I know, well, look, Rick's dead. Like, I know I can't really go sit down and have a beer with Rick while I'm asleep. I'm realizing that I'm dreaming. It's one of those odd things. I wonder if that was a portend of things. If Rick was telling me something like, you're going to have to go see Nick and Guy at some point here, buddy, when you come over.
I don't know.
Country.
It sounds like a cool adventure, though, in Dream World.
Well, he was super nice. I can tell him that, very cordial, and an understated English gentleman. But and he was sipping his drink while I was probably just guzzling it, asking for the next one before this one was even empty, if I know myself well enough. But anyway, the end of the first set is Set the Controls for the Heart of the Sun. Now, this one I remember from Pink Floyd in Pompeii, and Roger kind of whispering, "The Heart of the Sun," which of course Guy does too. He has to sing Rick's parts. He's also got to sing Roger's parts for the most part. Kind of a trippy song. It's a psychedelic song, but it's a cool one.
It's definitely a cool song. And this is one of the ones where the backdrop really added to the experience, because, like they have it kind of intensifies. The music intensifies as you're getting to the Heart of the Sun. And then the stuff in the back is really starting to freak out. And it added to it. And if you were perhaps, I don't know, on some kind of enhancement substance, that would have been very intense.
And does Nick kind of play the gong at the beginning of Set the Controls?
Yes, correct.
Because there are a couple of older guys next to us, one of whom had a booming voice, and I could hear their entire conversation. But he's like, "Remember this moment, gong solo." He's so excited about it.
But that was the great thing about this show, is that I remember them. There were, because I think there were 3 or 4 of them sitting on your side, and they were really excited to see this. And so I can imagine that, once the whole thing starts, and yes, he knows the gong solo's coming up, he's anticipating it. So when it does happen, yes, he's freaking out.
Yeah, he's telling
that he gets to see it.
Oh yeah, here it comes. So that was cool. And then they take a break, maybe like a 20-minute break, and they tell us, "Hey, we're going to take a 20-minute break." Pretty big exodus for the bathrooms and the beer line. But we did, I think, end up talking to that younger guy, who I think he said he's about 27, and he's a guitar player. And like his 10th birthday was going to see Roger Waters do Dark Side of the Moon or something like that. But what was cool, he's a guitar player, and he's into pedals, and he will send like Instagram stuff to Lee Harris about, "Oh, look, I've got this pedal. What do you think of this?" And he said Lee would get back to him a lot, which is pretty cool, because he's in it. He doesn't have a big band, he's just kind of a small, or a young musician trying to make it. But he loved Pink Floyd, and being there was a big deal for him, I could tell.
And that's where I'm not a super huge fan of social media. I think most of it is worthless.
Right.
And just a waste of time. But for him to be able to interact with Lee, and Lee being kind enough to get back to him about something, obviously a shared love that they have. Apparently Lee is just an absolute gearhead and loves, if there's something new, he's got to have it. And the guy was talking about some cabinet that one of the manufacturers had built for him, 40 watt, just massive, but they had put it in this little tiny space so that he could practice with something that was the same thing as on the stage. Yeah, he was just in heaven. And I have to give this guy, I can't remember what his name is, so I'm sorry, but probably one of the greatest mullets I've ever seen in my life. And just perfectly, business in the front, party in the back. He was definitely living the lifestyle, having a great time with, I think his brother was there with him. The 2 of them were in hog heaven.
Yeah, no, he seemed to be having a blast. I was happy for him. And so, since they took a little break during that part, why don't we take a break and we could let you all hear our conversation with Heather, our VIP winner from Indy.
Sounds good.
Hi, this is Gary Kemp,
And this is Guy Pratt, and you're listening to
the Ugly American Werewolf in London
podcast.
Hey, we are happy to welcome, and as you know, we have been proud sponsors of Nick Mason's Saucerful of Secrets tour of the U.S. and our mothership, if you will, Pantheon podcast, Pantheon Network, which we're proud to be a part of, was sponsoring it. Got us a great interview with Guy Pratt and Gary Kemp, which you can check out episode 96. But we got to go to the show in Indianapolis at Close Hall, and we were giving away a VIP package to one lucky listener of Pantheon Pods. And that listener is with us now, Heather, who came all the way from Illinois. It was more than a 3-hour drive to get to Indianapolis for that show. Heather, welcome to the Ugly American Werewolf in London podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
And congratulations on winning. That's so cool. Tell us a little bit about, do you listen to any Pantheon podcasts? How did you find Pantheon and this amazing VIP experience giveaway that you won?
How I found out about Pantheon podcast, Guy Pratt retweeted about the contest about a week before the first concert.
Gotcha.
And I entered a few times and started listening to a few then. I listened to your guys' show. I've listened to quite a few of them. And
well, thank you.
LA Woman Rocks.
LA Woman Rocks. There you
Okay.
go.
So I like listening to her too.
Excellent.
Well, cool. So
The nice part is once you get into listening to podcasts, you can download and, when you're doing something else, you can also listen. I do it when I'm, mowing the grass or, something else that I'm like, I don't want to do this. Hey, but I can listen to, I can listen to our latest episode. I can listen to Shout It Out Loud, who we love. I love to, Mistress Carrie, any of these. So once you get into it, you kind of find I don't have any time to listen to podcasts. No, you actually really do.
Yeah. Driving around, going to stores,
Mhm.
cleaning the house.
Driving
That's
for
right.
3 hours to get to the show.
Right.
Exactly. Well, so how did Pink Floyd come into your life? Look, we're almost 50, me and Jackson, and we kind of lived through the last incarnation of Pink Floyd in the late 80s and early 90s. I actually got to see them play at Tampa Stadium, but you're a little younger than us. You kind of missed out on that. So how did Pink Floyd, enter your life?
I've always liked listening to classic rock and stuff like that. And I was probably in high school when I first realized who they were when I was listening to them
Okay.
on the radio and stuff. And the first Pink Floyd CD I had was the Best of Echoes 2-disc thing, early 2000, maybe 2001.
That sounds about right. Yeah.
So that was around the time that I was finding out about them. Missed the Pulse tour, but I've seen it. It is great. All that, missed all the good parts, but
Well, but it's funny that you bring up Echoes, though, because that did come out, and that was the first time you really had a comprehensive greatest hits package kind of through the whole career of Pink Floyd, right? Because they had this Relics one that was kind of the Syd Barrett years. They had Works and maybe a collection of great dance songs that had a few of the 70s or later day things. Really, we talked about on the show, for us, the first real collection that maybe wasn't comprehensive, but it was a nice collection, was Delicate Sound of Thunder. When they did that tour, they put out a double live album. Obviously, it's live. It's not the studio stuff, but you get to hear the 70s stuff along with the stuff that they did on Momentary Lapse of Reason. That was really the first kind of killer collection. And it was really big for me and Jackson as teenagers and into our 20s. But I remember when Echoes came out, I was in my, let's call it late 20s. I was professional, and it was the heady days of Napster. And I remember my uncle saying, well, look, because he's like a copyright attorney. He's like, you shouldn't be doing that. Stop that Napster stuff. But if you find that old Pink Floyd, you can go ahead and make one of those for me, So after that came out, then I went ahead and made one for me and for him. And it was cool because I did get to hear, because look, we're also children of classic rock radio, and they don't really play much from before Dark Side of the Moon on American classic rock. Like, we know Money and Time and Wish You Were Here and The Wall. We know that backwards and forwards because they play the heck out of it. But the Syd Barrett years and the years that they had David, well, they were kind of, I don't know, reformulating their sound, finding their way together, because Syd was kind of the undisputed leader of the band. Then he kind of, the cheese slips off his cracker, and then we kind of have to figure out, okay, well, now what are we going to do without our guru around? So this is kind of and the tour that we saw is the Syd years, plus the years where the band were trying to find their footing as a four-piece before they blow up into like the biggest band in the whole world.
Right.
And so did you like that stuff? Do you like, Arnold Lane, CM Lee play, into stuff like Adam Hart, Mother, and Echoes, and Set the Controls for the Heart of the Sun? I mean, did that stuff inspire you from Echoes, or it was like, oh, I just like this big 70s stuff?
Oh, I liked Echoes. That was my favorite from the get-go. Adam Hart, Mother, it's beautiful. I get chills whenever I hear it, especially at the concert, hearing it live. Ooh.
Yeah, to see them do. Yeah, to see them do Echoes live, it was amazing, and everybody knew it was coming, and that was kind of the highlight of the show. But to actually watch them do it, I mean, because it's 21, 22 minutes long, to see them do that, and all the changes and how you remember that, and to see it live, and I think that's really the big thing that the whole show, it just kind of proved to me, is that it's just not the same. Like, you can listen to the records over and over and over again, but to see them do it live and watch them, the interplay between the musicians is just, I mean, it's insane. And to see Nick kind of back there as the grandfather, watching, because I mean, he inspired all the guys who were in the band. He inspired them to, I'm sure, start to play. To see them, at this level is got to be a great feeling for him also.
Yeah, and they call it the Echoes Tour because this is their second tour. They went out a few years ago. Actually, when I first moved to London, and I'm reading in Classic Rock magazine, you have to go see Nick Mason, Saucerful of Secrets. Of course, I missed it, but they did release it, live from the Roundhouse is this really nice package that they put together with CDs and DVD in there. So you can see it happen. And then obviously COVID came about and we couldn't go see rock shows for a while, but that was a lifeline to say, okay, well, when they come back, I've got to see that. And they didn't do Echoes on the first tour. They did, a lot of the Syd stuff and a lot of the other stuff, but when we had Gary and Guy on, Gary was saying how Echoes was the one that really kind of turned the switch. And I think they were a little intimidated to do it on the first run, but then they said, okay, well, now I guess we kind of have to do Echoes, don't we? And it's the one that kind of set Pink Floyd up for their sound, starting with Dark Side, right? I mean, you can see where all that big, huge 70s and 80s rock grandeur came from, starting with Echoes, right? Yeah,
they really found themselves there.
And it was interesting too, because that was played. They had a set, and then they took a break. And then, kind of in the intermission, everybody's talking like, okay, here it comes.
You won front row seats, Heather. How cool is that?
Yeah.
Tell us exactly where you were in relation to the stage.
I was on the left side. Lee was right in front of me. I was about 5 feet from the speaker stack.
Wow.
It was amazing.
So were you blown out being that close, or did it just sound crystal clear and awesome?
It was crystal clear. Bit of a headache, but it was worth it.
Heck yeah. And Lee was right there. Didn't Lee give you something special during the show?
I got 2 of his picks.
Oh, nice.
That he played with. That was really cool.
That is super cool. And he just celebrated his birthday yesterday as we were recording.
Yes, he did. Happy belated birthday. I think Dom's about a month older than him. I think right around the start of the tour, he had his 50th birthday too.
Oh, is that right?
I think so.
That's good knowledge right there. Yeah, that's good, Heather. Yeah, cool.
I don't remember if it was right before it started or the first week of the tour. Somewhere in there, I believe, was his birthday.
I think you're right. I think I may have seen that on social media. Tell us about the other goodies. I mean, look, getting front row seats, that's experience enough, right? But they give you some other fun little goodies when you get to the Nick Mason show.
We got a tour T-shirt with all the tour stops on the back.
Nice.
A little tote bag, and the piece de resistance, if you will, was a little necklace carved out of one of Nick's symbols that he's played with the Nick Mason logo, Saucerful of Secrets on the front. You can't
That's
buy
awesome.
that anywhere.
Yeah.
No, you can't. You
Yeah,
can't.
we were kind of hanging around. We were watching the VIP, and we're like, well, if they have any more of those left, they didn't have any more of those left. Those were closely guarded. That is a very hard piece of memorabilia to get your hands on. So congratulations.
Thank you. I thought it was going to be like a pick, but it was just a little round, about the size of a quarter.
So like a symbol. Okay. Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah, more like a symbol. Yeah.
Okay. Because I told my 8-year-old daughter about that. She's like, Daddy, can you get me one of those? I said, I don't think so, sweetheart. No, I don't think so. All right. So what are your highlights? I mean, obviously Echoes blew you away, kind of blows everyone away, but are there any favorite standout moments from the show, or even, songs that like you didn't know that well and like, wow, to hear them live, that's actually pretty cool.
Is it Bridges Burning or Burning Bridges? That's the opposite of the way they sing at the title. That one I didn't really know as well.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't quite sing along with it, but all of them were great, really. It's hard to pick, just a favorite because they're kind of all favorites. It was so much fun.
So it was worth the drive.
Oh yes. If they come back again to the US, I definitely am going to be seeing them somewhere.
Excellent. Well, I'm glad it was somebody like you that won, and not somebody like, yeah, you know what, I live, 2 blocks from here, and I said whatever. I mean, you really wanted to see this show, and so I'm glad that you won and got the chance to have the VIP experience.
It was amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you, Pantheon Podcasts. Thank you, Guy Pratt, for tweeting us.
You come from Illinois. You drove 3 hours up there, but you didn't spend the night, right? You drove 3 hours or 4 hours.
We drove back. I brought my brother with me, and he had to be at work at 7:30 or 8 Saturday morning.
That's
he
a
got
trooper.
a nap.
That is a trooper.
He got a little bit of a nap and was off back to work.
Those are true facts.
He called me on his way home so he could talk and stay awake.
Well, I'm glad you did that for him, and he did that for you to drive you there. And that's true fans right there. Like Jackson says, like, well, they're in the neighborhood, so maybe I'll try to win. No, you were going to try to win at one of the shows somewhere, and you won Indy, and then you made the trek and you got home in the middle of the night. That's a true fan. That's who we wanted to win this experience.
We got home about 2 a.m.
Oh, geez.
And my dog woke up the house. I'm not used to people coming in the middle of the night.
All right, Jackson, you have anything left? Anything else for Heather?
Thanks for being a listener. Thanks for coming out. Really appreciate you entering the contest and winning. And feel free to check out any of the Pantheon podcasts. And if you like Gary and Guy, check out the Rockonteurs, because that's a great show. The two of them are great together. They have some really big guests.
They have Patty Constantine on today. Constantine
I saw
from
that. Yes,
that's right.
House of the Dragon, King of the Series.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to give that one a listen while I'm cooking.
Also from Hot Fuzz.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
All right, Heather, look, thank you so much for being on the show. Congratulations on being the Pantheon VIP winner at Indy. Again, thanks for listening to our show, for the other Pantheon shows. Thanks for being a Pink Floyd fan and keeping the music alive.
Thank you guys so much.
Thanks.
Concert of a lifetime. Thank you.
Glad you enjoyed.
Excellent.
Hi, this is Steve Hackett, and you're listening to The Ugly American Werewolf in London.
All right, and like Big Bass and Saucerful of Secrets, we're back for set 2. And I got to tell you, I really enjoyed set 2. Not that I don't enjoy set 1, but this is where they kind of get into some really trippy stuff and some heavy stuff. I mean, some of this is heavy metal-ish, some of these songs that they go into here.
Yeah.
Now, Astronomy Domine, that's a big kind of pre-Dark Side Pink Floyd song. I think a lot of people know that. Kind of trippy. Again, I think I knew that from Pink Floyd live at Pompeii. So I really enjoyed seeing that one. It's one they can stretch out a little bit. But then they get into the Nile song, and then that's a little heavier, right?
Yeah, and I think you're right. Most of the stuff that I knew was from the live at Pompeii, and this was not one of them. So this was kind of a new thing for me. This was off of, where did we get this from? I think this was a David Gilmour, Roger Waters compilation.
Okay.
And so, yeah, like you're right. Now we're getting into some bigger stuff, or some more heavy stuff. I'm actually I was kind of on the fence about the intermission. I was like, do we really need this? But I think it was a nice break. Everybody kind of needed. I know the band kind of needed a break, and I think the crowd needed a break too. Again, just kind of get yourself reset for the next set.
Absolutely. No, I remember when Rush did an evening with Rush, starting in the mid to late '90s, and I'm like, oh man, what are they taking a break for? I'm like, well, because they're playing for 3 hours, and they're not kids anymore. And yeah, break it up, give people, instead of saying, here's one of our new songs and letting people go to the bathroom for that, give them a built-in bathroom break, right? Yeah.
Well, and the other thing too is you only have so much capacity, and after a while, even if you're really into it, you're just going to get tired.
Mm-hmm.
You're just going to get worn out. So yeah, I'm glad that they did that, so that we could kind of again reset and get ready for the next act.
Yeah, and it worked out great.
Yeah,
and then it seemed like they went. Now song was kind of heavy, Burning Bridges. Cool song, and I think Heather really liked that one from her vantage point. But then Childhood's End, I don't know. I thought Lucifer Sam was obviously kind of a Sid song, right? And I see where Arthur Brown is. Our buddy Paul Stevenson recently interviewed Arthur Brown on his show, and he's got new music coming out where he does rework his classic Fire. But I think he's doing a version of Lucifer Sam on there too, so that'll be interesting to hear. But that's kind of showing Sid's wackiness there, I would say.
Right. And again, it all goes back to Sid starting the band, and kind of setting everything into motion. But the only kind of bad part about the second set is that you knew Echoes was going to be in there, and that's really what everybody was super pumped for that. So it was kind of like everybody was listening, but they were just waiting, like, okay, it's almost here.
You're absolutely right, and that's why I'm kind of breezing through Burning Bridges, Childhood's End. These were all performed very well, and I enjoyed all of them. But it was like, okay, now there's only 2 more till Echoes. Right. Now there's only 1 more till Echoes, right? And then when Echoes comes in, that's what, and that's what that 27, that guitar player kid, he's like, this is what I've been waiting for my whole life. I never thought that I would see this, and it's making it very special for him. And I'm like, you are seeing something special here, because Echoes is, God, I mean, how do you describe it? It's epic. It's complicated. It's complex to play. It's got a lot of movements and kind of ups and downs, not to mention the kind of psychedelic stuff going on behind. And did Guy get to hit the gong or hit the cymbals on this one? There's all sorts of stuff going on this thing.
Yeah, and that was kind of the buzz even before the show started, when everybody was kind of out in the lobby, that you could hear the conversations going back and forth. And yeah, that's what everybody was waiting for. I really don't understand how they do this, how you can memorize enough music. I mean, 24 plus minutes of music. Nothing is written out. There's a lot of changes. The time, it slows, it speeds up, it slows down. You're playing different instruments. I don't understand how they do that. But at the beginning, they had the little tiny circle in the back, and then boom, it got a little bit bigger, and then boom, and then it got a little bit bigger. It was just like, I'm freaking out, and they're not even playing anything yet.
I know, and it's probably a good time to kind of talk a little bit about the demeanor of these guys. Starting off with Nick, what is he, 78 or something like that? I know that he probably broke a sweat and was pretty active, but he never looked like he was working hard to me. It all looked like it flowed to him, like he wasn't straining back there. Yes, he was hitting those drums and hitting all the different pieces and stuff like that, but and drumming is a very physical activity, but it didn't seem like it was wearing him out. It just seemed like he was in a flow and had a good rhythm to him.
If you watch the show with the sound off and just watched him play, you'd think, well, he's not really doing anything back there. Because you're right, he's not all over the place. He's not reaching. He's not slamming the drums around. But then when you listen, now he can do a lot with an economy of movement. And again, like you said, he's 80. The show is an hour and 20 minutes, hour 30 minutes altogether.
Oh no, it's. I mean, look, dude, it's like 2.5 hours.
Okay.
Like it's an hour and 20. And then they take a break, and that's another hour, and then they come back for the encore. It's a lot.
So you got to pace yourself, and I think that he can do a lot with an economy of movement back there. And again, he knows what he's doing. He's been doing this for a long time, and to hear him play, there's a lot going on in the drum kit.
A lot going on, that's for sure. And then we move out front. to our boy Guy Pratt. I've just been a big fan of his ever since the Delicate Sound of Thunder days, when he was this mop top kid, running in place with his bass during, Run Like Hell. And he's funny, he's quick witted, doesn't take a whole lot of shit from people, and he has to sing, and he's got that bass, and he can kind of thump around the stage. You can kind of check everybody out, see how they're doing, have some fun with Gary while they're touching feet, at the beginning of the show and stuff like that. But I still feel like he's kind of in charge, and he and Gary do most of the crowd work. Nick does some because it's his band and it's his name on top there, and he wants to thank people. But it seems like Guy is really the master of ceremonies out there in front to me.
That's what it seemed like. You pointed that out at the Royal Albert show, and we talked about that during the interview. But yeah, you can really see that, like, he's playing his part, the bass, he's singing, he gets to play the gong a little bit. But yeah, you can see that he's scanning everybody else to make sure, okay, everybody know where we are, everybody good, everybody, right. There's no problems. He would turn and look back at Nick. He would look at Lee and Gary, and really, yeah, he's kind of the guy. I didn't see him do anything like, hey, you're off or you're out or whatever, but definitely making sure that everybody's on the same page.
Yeah, and he had a little stand there where he could put his picks and stuff. It also looked, maybe he had a vape kind of a thing going on there, maybe.
He had something. Yeah. Something was going on there. I didn't really see him exhale at all, but,
right.
He's a professional, so.
Yeah, that's right. I never exhale.
Yeah, exactly.
Senator. And then there's Gary Kemp over there. He's got a lot of toys. Obviously, you're used to people having pedals, but he had this thing that he could work with his hands to make all these creepy and crazy noises throughout Echoes and some of the other songs. And it's really cool. Plus, he's kind of tall. He's like 6 feet tall, which for a rock star, like Joe Perry's like 5'4", 5'3" or something like that. And he looks like a badass, but he's not that tall. But Gary is, and he's got a great smile. He's obviously an entertainer,
Well, like we pointed out too, he's not only is he a professional musician, he's a professional actor also. Yes. So yes, has a very good command of the stage and command of the crowd. And I thought it was interesting to see him and Nick go back and forth. Like Nick was obviously the star of the show. We get that. He would go up and he would say what he had to, and then Gary would take over, do the shtick about it was great to see the T-shirts from the other bands. I thought that was great. Keep the Flame Alive from Metallica and AC/DC. And then he was very upset that no one had the Spandau Ballet.
No one has the Spandau Ballet T-shirt, but I got to tell you, if I'd had one in 1983, it wouldn't fit now.
I've got it on. It's a child's medium.
Exactly. But talking about working the stage, Nick's saying, the first time we ever played here was Market Square Arena on the Delicate Sound of Thunder tour, on the Momentary Lapse of Reason tour. And I thought that was interesting. That means it doesn't surprise me that in the SIG years they didn't hit Indianapolis.
Right.
But from 72 through, that's the thing. They didn't do many shows. Obviously, in the 80s, they didn't really do too many wall shows. They only did a handful, I think, in America. They wouldn't have hit Indy. And then that would have been the next tour. But I guess Animals never hit Indy. Wish You Were Here never hit Indy. And obviously, when they toured for the big one, for Dark Side of the Moon, they didn't hit Indy as well. It's a little surprising, but, not to denigrate Indianapolis or Indiana. Indianapolis back in like the 60s and 70s was kind of nicknamed India No Place. Like, it wasn't that great of a spot. And then I think over the years, they've invested a lot in downtown, and they've, their ABA team became an NBA team. And then that kind of helped give them some credibility. They got the Colts in there in 83 or 84 when they kind of left Baltimore in the middle of the night. I think that helped them grow up quite a bit. And, they have some big business based in Indy, which has grown up. Like, I think, is Eli Lilly, one of the big drug companies, is up there, and stuff like that. So Indianapolis has grown up quite a bit in the last 50 plus years. Obviously, they used to have Farm Aid and stuff like that there, and they can host big events. They host the Final Four all the time. They've hosted a Super Bowl at this point, which is no mean feat. Jacksonville hosted a Super Bowl. They'll never host another one. Indy hosted one, and they'll probably do it again. So they've kind of proven that they've grown up, and so I don't know. I just thought that was interesting that was the first time that Nick had been to Indy was 87.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing too. The only thing about Indianapolis is it's only how many hours from Chicago?
Well, if you take a Flixbus, it's about 3.5 to 4 hours. But you're right. I mean, driving, it's only about 3 hours. And then
right.
It's not that far from Cincinnati.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that far from Cleveland. It's not that far from, say, a St. Louis or a Nashville. So there are other places to go in the general vicinity, and it would be easy to fly over those places back in the day.
Right.
Now, Dom Beacon, I didn't see much of. He's back there behind all those keyboards, and he's making some great noises and kind of giving us, Rick Wright's portion of these songs.
Mm-hmm.
But I think he's also triggering the sound effects, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe that's somebody off stage, but that's a big job at a show like this.
Yeah. He probably had like 5 or 6 keyboards that he was working with, plus some other stuff there that you probably couldn't see. I don't know if he had pedals down there, but he was definitely working hard.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a Fairlight that you program that stuff into. I mean, I know Jeff Downs kind of keeps one of those around because he kind of needs to.
Yeah.
For yes, yeah, but he's those textures and those keys are very, very important part of Pink Floyd's sound, all provided by the late great Rick Wright. So that's an important role to play, and that he's going to have to get that right with Guy and Nick in the band.
And that's the other thing too is we were talking about how complicated Echoes is. It just by itself, if you trigger that at the wrong time, just for whatever reason, that's going to throw everything.
He's fucked up the whole song.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Know?
What is going on?
Yeah.
How is that even possible that you're doing this at the wrong time? But yeah, you were talking about that Gary's rig. There was a lot going on. He had that thing that was he had pedals on the ground.
Sure.
He also had the thing that was probably 3 or 4 feet tall,
waist high.
That he could mess with. And at some point in time, like there were knobs that he was turning. He had the guitar and he was kind of putting it in front of it, like to make to
feedback or something.
To have the pickups feedback on it. So yeah, there was a lot going on to get it all coordinated like that is insane to me. But I'm not a professional musician. I didn't hear them make any mistakes. I didn't see that look from Guy, like, what are you doing?
Right.
Nothing like that. I mean, it all seemed to flow pretty well.
Very well. Absolutely. And then to see Lee Harris, he was the one who I really got to see better being in the front this time versus being on the other side of him. And he apparently likes gold, because he had his gold Strat, his gold Telly, and I guess you said that was a gold Music Man that he had.
That's what it looked like, yeah.
But he was really good, and I think it was him who really kind of put forth this idea to Nick to let's do the pre-Dark Side stuff, because he's like, Nick, let's go out and do something. He's like, nah, it's kind of already been done. We did it in Pink Floyd, and David's been out and done it. And Roger goes out and does it all the time, so I don't think so. He's like, no. Let's do the Sid stuff and the stuff that came out before. It's like, all right, well, that's interesting, because not anybody authentic. There may be tribute bands or cover bands that do that, but no one authentic Pink Floyd has really ever done that before. I think that's what turned Nick's head.
Yeah. If Nick Mason went out to do The Wall, nobody would show up to that, because like you said, it's been done a million times. And I don't think Roger or David is going to really get into the old stuff. So it does really fill a spot. And so kudos to Lee for thinking about that. But it was also cool to see him and Gary interact, because, at first you'd say, okay, I understand what's going on. Lee is the rhythm and Gary's the lead, but then that switched back and forth. Lee could rip it up when it was his turn.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's somebody who grew up playing these Pink Floyd songs and loves them. Finally get the opportunity to play them, you're going to do it right. And as recording this, he just turned 50. And I was kind of curious about that, because I know how old Guy and Gary are, because, we've watched them play for years. So we know,
right.
They're about 60-ish, something like that. We know that Nick's nearly 80 now. And I just kind of figured that Dom and Lee were probably Guy and Gary's age, but no, they're our age. I think Dom had his birthday maybe a month before Lee did, and he's 50, so that to me is really awesome. Talk about a dream come true. Guys our age get to play Pink Floyd stuff with the rhythm section of Pink Floyd. How cool is that, man?
Yeah. And to have this idea, to think about it, and then bringing it to Nick and have him saying, yes, let's do this. That's a great idea. Would be awesome also, because, again, you grew up doing this. You probably learned these songs in your bedroom with whatever equipment that you had, either a hand-me-down or, some kind of cheap guitar, I'm sure, when he first started. And yeah, now to be a pro and to play this live in front of these people has to be a dream come true.
Well, and he said at the Royal Albert Hall show that he grew up like in that neighborhood, like in probably a pretty nice house, actually, because it's just a very nice neighborhood. But he could see the gear being loaded into Royal Albert Hall for these shows, and so he would dream about playing Royal Albert Hall one day. So that's pretty cool that he succeeded on that front. But look, Echoes it was amazing. And I mean, over 20 minutes, they're doing all this cool stuff, and then they kind of got to bring it back together after they go freak out in this big psychedelic way to kind of pull it back together into some shape and then round it out. Huge round of applause, right? Huge round of applause.
Yeah.
The young guy with the killer mullet, the guitar player. I mean, I'm surprised he wasn't in tears. He was like, he was so psyched to see that song live. And it made me happy. Look, I'm happy for us to see it, but to be around fans to whom this means so much is a really cool experience.
And it's interesting too, because you can listen to the albums over and over and over again by yourself, or even with, a couple of people in the room, because we used to do that back in the day.
Right.
To hear a live performance with people you've never met before, and to see everybody who was so excited. You would think, do people even remember these songs? I mean, they were so long ago, and even in the Pink Floyd universe, they're kind of obscure. No, everybody loved them. It was great to hear them. They sounded great. And just to have that communal experience with these people, because I was watching him, because when he said that, how excited he was. I'm like, I'm gonna see if this
check in on him.
I want to see if he got his money's worth. He absolutely did. He was freaking out. In fact, they had an encore. Even if they stopped after that, he would have been fine.
Absolutely. Yeah, no. And you got to think that for those guys to pull that off, then that's a whew, thank you, good night. And then they can come out and do. And really, look, See Emily Play and Bike are pop songs, really, the 60s pop song. Saucerful of Secrets is a cool kind of, got that psychedelic feel to it, Pink Floyd piece. But Bike is kind of a funny little song. And you heard the crowd singing along. And that was cool to me, because I know they don't hear that on the radio. They don't know that from listening to classic rock radio. They know it because either they had echoes, or they listened to it back in the day on the original LP, or even the single. And it's a funny little song, but people loved it, and it's a fun way to kind of wrap up the show.
Right. It's a lighthearted way after you've been through this giant piece of music. Yeah, to do that kind of at the end, everybody's excited but also exhausted at that point in time. Yeah, it was a great way to end, and it was a cool little sing-along song. Yeah, and I gotta say, some of the more expensive seats around us were empty for maybe the first half of the show, but by the second half, and certainly by the encore, they were full. But people had worked their way down. People who were out back in the back said, "Well, why don't we just go down there?" Right,
and that's the way it ought to be. They ought to be playing to a full crowd. They said during the intermission they thought the crowd was great. Now, I've never heard someone come out and say, "We all decided you're a very average crowd," or "You're not a good crowd. You're not doing it for us." So
no, wait a minute. Yes, you have. Yes, you have. Yes, when you went to go see the Cult, you were, Well,
okay, yeah. I don't know if it was. He didn't say the crowd was bad. He was just like, energy.
Yes,
you have to let us know. We don't know how we're doing unless you scream.
Right, and that's a very good point, though. And Ian was bent out of shape that night because the crowd wasn't giving him what he needed.
Right,
and I think that everybody was giving them what they needed that night. I mean, the energy was fantastic. Everybody was there to. Well, I mean, a lot of people were there to see Echoes, but just to see these things. And I'm glad that they got positive feedback from the crowd, because it's kind of hard to tell when you're just sitting there kind of, with just a couple of people that you can see.
Right. And again, this is the show. I mean, we all stand up and applaud. Okay, they're on. This is great. We're so glad to hear it. Basically, everybody sat down through this whole show. It's not a stand up with your fist in the air kind of show. This is like sit down and scratch your chin and say, "Whoa, yes, they're doing this very well at this point," kind of thing. So you might sing along, you might clap your hands and stomp your feet, but you're doing it from a seated position. for the most part. And that's why sometimes it's hard to tell, are they digging the crowd or are they kind of bumped, right?
Yeah. Well, I know when Gary had his whatever that thing is, that pick thing, the lighted,
it's like a digital
that
pick that's the size of like a beeper or a cell phone or something.
When he was playing that, like I was just intently focusing on what that thing was and trying to figure out, how he was playing it, what it was. And so it kind of just keying in on one part of the show. So I'm glad that the crowd overall was good for them.
No, that's kind of what I've been getting. I mean, I think that even if the upper deck isn't full or something like that, everyone who's there is psyched to be there.
Yeah.
The band is really on point, and they kind of own some of these songs. Some of these Pink Floyd never did as a band, or if they did, they haven't done them in more than 50 years. Mm-hmm. And so they're really the owners of these songs and really keeping the flame alive for this part of the catalog, which has a very loyal, maybe not huge, but an incredibly loyal fan base.
Right. And I think that if you give this a chance, you will enjoy it. But I would say, just go out there and see this if you get the chance, because you will come away saying, you know what, I really need to listen to the Obscured by Clouds. I need to listen to
Metal,
Atom Heart Mother, all of these records, because they're great and they're underserved.
Underserved in American classic rock. I mean,
correct.
Classic rock radio will play the hell out of Dark Side of the Moon and Wish You Were Here on the Wall. And obviously you're going to know that, but this is underserved. And so I was glad to see that in America, because in England, the radio kind of works differently. And Arnold Lane and See Emily Play and Bike, they really were hits on the radio. Whereas maybe they weren't huge hits on the radio in America, or if they were, eventually they kind of went away and gave way to the Dark Side of the Moon kind of.
Right.
But I was glad to see that so many Americans did know the stuff and were so into it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, there wasn't any kind of lull in it at all. There was no like, I don't really know this song, so yeah, I'm gonna get up and do something else. No, everybody was into everything, and like I said, I didn't see there wasn't any kind of dip anywhere in the show. It was pretty much constant energy the whole time.
Absolutely, and we were fortunate enough to get our psychedelic tour posters autographed by the guys. Those will be getting framed here shortly. I did get it back to Europe in one piece.
Excellent.
So it was a special night. So glad to be part of Pantheon, so that we could do this, so we could represent them, but see the show, and our first concert together in almost 3 decades, Gary. I mean, that's kind of crazy when you think about it.
Right. And I've been talking to my wife about this. You can't get upset for things that you didn't do in the past.
Right.
I should have done that. You know what? Let's just take this and move forward and make sure that it's not another 27 years before we do it again.
Well, it's not as well, and we'll see what the travel situation is. But I did secure us tickets to 2 Iron Maiden shows next summer.
Yeah, and I would be very upset if I missed those. So yes, definitely travel plans are being made right now.
And speaking of shows in the future, Roger Waters has announced his farewell tour is beginning. And I went ahead. He is coming to Amsterdam, so I went ahead and picked up tickets to that. Now, Roger has gotten himself back in the news again because,
oh boy,
yeah, he's in favor of Ukraine giving up the Donbas to Russia and just being happy with them annexing Crimea. And now he says that he's on a list to be killed by Ukrainian operatives. And I'm like, that may all be true, Roger, but that doesn't mean you're not a paranoid wackadoo. Seriously, what's wrong with you?
Well, and you have to know that if you make comments like that, there's going to be a backlash. There's going to be a backlash. I don't understand why you can't just say, hey, tour coming up. Can't wait to see all of you. So excited.
Well, I have seen Roger twice, and I got to tell you, he puts on a hell of a show. I saw him do The Wall, which is obviously an enormous production, building up the wall and then tearing it down and all that kind of thing. But then he made a new album, 5 years ago, something like that. And he toured on that. And I mean, the screens and the lasers and the stuff that he uses in his show is kind of unbelievable. It's pretty amazing. They're expensive tickets, but given the show, they're kind of worth it.
Okay. Well, I mean, that's part of it too, is what you're getting for what you're paying. And I think that, I don't know, I think that what you paid for this Nick Mason show, I think you're getting every bit of it out of it. I mean,
Absolutely.
Let's be real honest. There isn't the laser show like you're going to see at the
Roger.
Roger Waters
Right.
deal. But I mean, I think it all flowed together. I think there was enough of a stage show that enhanced the music.
Absolutely.
The musicianship was top notch. And just the energy from the band was really cool too. You could really tell that they were all happy to be together as a band.
Absolutely. No, they were having fun together. They enjoyed playing together and being together. You see them on social media. They're on a bus together, and they may sleep in hotels, but they're on a bus all day together. And it's a very
Including
nice bus.
Nick.
Yeah.
It's not like, oh, Nick's got his own bus and the band goes together. No, they're all just kind of sitting around there goofing around, doing their own thing and, just having fun.
Yeah. Reading the paper, making smoothies, cracking jokes, doing what they have to do there. Nick could probably break out the private plane if he wanted to. He could fly the plane if he really wanted to.
Correct.
But no, it's like, we're going to do this 6 weeks. We're going to be on the bus together. And it seems to be going really well. Now, by the time you hear this, there will only be a few left. I think there's a couple of, there's like a Santa Barbara and an LA show at the Orpheum. There's Fox Theater in Oakland. And there's Seattle, where we will have VIP winners for Pantheon. I think they wrap up in Vancouver, and we're not there. Pantheon won't be there for that, but that's where they wrap it up. 6 weeks, killer shows. And yes, absolutely go see them if you have the opportunity. Don't miss it, because who knows? This had to be postponed for 2 years because of COVID. Now Nick's settling in at 80. He never had to do this for the money. Mm-hmm. So does he want to go out and work more? Does he want to stay home with the grandkids more? I don't know. Only time will tell on that.
Yeah, and I think that after the whole COVID deal, that's the 2 years kind of got lost with all this stuff. So yeah, I would say if you have the chance, you may not get another one. So I'll catch him next time. No, catch him right now, because you never know.
Absolutely.
Hi guys, this is Chris Slade, drummer of AC/DC and many others, and you're listening to the ugly, really ugly, Werewolf in London.
Now, we got a few minutes left here.
Mm-hmm.
Our 100th episode. What were your give me some top moments?
I mean, the top moments have to be the interviews that we got to do. I mean, because that, to me, that's just like, we can have a show and that's fun, and we can, fool around back and forth, and we can talk about, oh yeah, I remember when we saw this show or listened to this record. But to actually get to talk to some of these people was just amazing. I mean, we got to talk to Amanda Lehman, we got to talk to Steve Hackett, we got to talk to both Jeff Downs and Carl Palmer from Asia, which I didn't think would ever happen.
I know. I remember as soon as we started the show, I'm like, all right, we got to try to get Jeff Downs on. We got to try to, because Asia, for whatever reason, on paper, we shouldn't like Asia, but in practice, there's something about them that we just love and we can't deny. So we love Asia. I admit it. Used to be a guilty pleasure. Now I'm old enough to say, you know what? I like Asia. Screw you. Fine. And I started working on his PR person for a long time, and then eventually the opportunity came, and it had to get rescheduled, but it worked out great. And it turns out we interviewed Carl Palmer the day that Alan White died.
Yeah,
and then 4 days later, whatever it was, that's when we interviewed Jeff. So one of his first interviews after the loss of Alan White. But we got to talk to him about Yes in Asia, and that was huge. Unfortunately, you had to miss the Deborah Bonham.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Interview with her husband, Peter Bullock, who you would have loved, just a classic Irishman, funny, quick-witted, you could tell a great story,
Didn't he say something about that he was the Irish werewolf?
The Irish werewolf, in England. Yeah, we may cut that in. But, and just to get each of them to say, hey, this is Jeff Downs. Hey, this is Carl Palmer. Hey, this is Steve Hackett, whatever. Hey, this is Guy Pratt and Gary Kemp. And you're listening to Ugly American Werewolf. That to me is worth it. That to me. And we record the audio on Zoom, but we don't use the videos. But I've got the videos that we can watch every once in a while. Like, here's me and Gary talking to Chris Slade, talking about playing with Jimmy Page and David Gilmour and And AC/DC,
Yeah.
that story he told about he got the same day, within a couple of hours, first a call from David Gilmour and then a call from Jimmy Page saying, come play with me. That's unbelievable to me.
And having Jimmy Page say, "Oh, you're booked? Yeah, we'll wait. No problem.
Right.
Just let us know." Yeah.
Yeah. The Zeppelin catalog still sells. I got no worries, man.
Yeah. Yeah. To think that, you know, how far we've come in 100 episodes is crazy. I mean, this really just started off, I don't want to say as a goof, but it started off just, you know, let's see what we can do. Let's just put this together. And to be able to say that, you know, this is our 100th show. And we've got to, you know, interview people. We've got to, you know, we're listening to music that we never got to that we've never listened to before.
Right.
We get to talk to people that I never thought we'd talk to. It's incredible.
And we get to go to cool places and talk about it. You know, I got to go into Abbey Road Studios. You know, I mean, now I lived right off Abbey Road for years there, but you can't just walk in there. You know, you've got to have a special occasion and ticket to get in. And fortunate enough, I was fortunate enough to do that. You think about all the music, including music by Pink Floyd, that was made in there. It's unbelievable. But it's also, what's cool is, you know, we've connected with a lot of other folks like us, people who love rock and roll and love the minutiae and all the details about it, whether it's other podcasters like Neil from Def Leppard Pod, or Jay from the Hook Rocks, or the Shout It Out Loud guys, or Christy Alexander Hallberg, you know, with Rock is Lit, or just someone like Anna Stella, who, you know, is a rock journalist, you know, and has kind of pushed her way to having a career in this, you know, really cool. Or Chris from Rock These Tweets, you know, huge Def Leppard fan, you know, it's great to connect with these folks and talk with them on the show. And we've got some fun stuff coming up, you know, here in the next few months that we can't wait to share with everybody.
Yeah, just, you know, it's 100 episodes, but I kind of feel like in some ways we're just getting started here.
Well, that's right. I mean, we've got over 1,000 episodes in it. You know, because if we just did records we love, that's at least 500, right? Plus, we're going to be starting to do shows, you know, more concerts that we go to, and then obviously interviews. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of opportunity out there for that. So I'm just glad that we get to do it, Jackson, and that we've reconnected here. You know, we were never on social media until we started the show. We don't write letters and emails. We kind of text. That's kind of our thing. But then we get an hour every week just about to forget about all the nonsense in our lives and just do something that we like with somebody who we know shares the passion and the knowledge of rock and roll music the way that we each do. So that's pretty cool. So I got to thank you for sticking around for 100 shows with me.
Well, I appreciate that. And I have to thank you for really being the catalyst to this and getting us hooked up with Pantheon and kind of making this more of a legitimate deal and not just two people BSing around.
Right. You know, I kind of came up with the idea of having a podcast before I moved to London. And I kind of came up with the name Ugly American Werewolf in London. Okay. Has a nice ring to it. Kind of taking two famous turns of phrase, sticking them together to make something unique. That's cool. What am I going to talk about? I walked out on the street today and they were driving on the other side of the road. You know, that's not a fucking show. You know, who cares? Oh, look, the dollar went up against the pound. I'll transfer some money over. Who gives a shit? You know, no one cares. You know, what am I going to talk about? I don't even know. And then when COVID hit, suddenly we're talking more and we're giving each other homework. Like, you listen to this, I'll listen to this. And next week we'll get together and talk about it. And then I just kind of started to realize this is the show. This is what you're looking for something you have passion about. You look for something that you have a friend, a cohort, a partner in crime to do it with. It's a no-brainer. It's like if someone said to me when I was thinking about, should I do a podcast? Like, well, if you're going to do a rock music podcast, who are you do it with? Only one name is going to come up. Action Jackson. It's easy.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. We should have started it in our dorm room 30 years ago, except, there's no such thing as podcast then. And, and I don't know if the Apple II GS had the capacity to record more than one or two shows. We'd have to get more memory after that.
Well, better late than never. And here we are.
This is Neil from Def Leppard Pod.
Hey guys, this is Ryan Condal, the executive producer, writer, creator of House of the Dragon.
Hi, I'm Amanda Lehman.
Hey guys, this is Chris from My Rock and Roll Heaven.
Hi, this is Christy Alexander Hallberg, author of the novel Searching for Jimmy Page.
Hey, this is Anna Stella.
Hi, I'm Deborah Bonham.
And I am the Irish werewolf in England, Peter Bullock.
Hey, this is Tom and Zeus from Shout It Out Loudcast.
And you are listening to the Ugly American Werewolf in London Rock Podcast.
Hi, I'm Paul Stevenson from Vintage Rock Pod.
Hi, this is Carl Palmer.
Hi, this is Jeff Downs.
Hi, guys. This is Chris Slade.
Hi, this is Steve Hackett.
This is Sunny Hollywood Pooney.
Hi, this is Gary Kemp.
And this is Guy Pratt. And you're listening to
The Ugly American Werewolf in London
podcast.
Well, folks, that wraps up our 100th episode of the Ugly American Werewolf in London Rock Podcast. And I just want to say thank you. Thank you to everyone who has supported us, who has listened to us over the years, who loves rock and roll, the rock and roll music that Jackson and I love. It's meant a lot to us, all your support. We've had a lot of fun building this really from nothing, from two guys who just love rock and roll, who lived together in college for a couple of years and have kind of reconnected as I've moved to Europe and during the COVID pandemic needed a way to kind of forget about our worries for a while, and to connect with someone who we knew had a deep, meaningful connection to rock and roll. And that's where the Ugly American Werewolf in London Rock Podcast came out of. And now almost 2 years and 100 episodes later, we're still going. And I got to say, going strong. I mean, doing better episodes, improving our sound quality, hopefully, getting incredible guests on, whether they be musicians who we've admired all our lives or fellow podcasters who have fantastic shows and interesting opinions, and just rock fans in general. Doing this show probably means more to us than it should, but we really appreciate everyone out there who's listening. We appreciate all of our guests. We appreciate Pantheon Podcasts, the family of podcasts that we are proud to be a part of. We are proud to represent EIL.com or RareVinyl.com, our sponsors, where you can still get 10% off all your orders by using our code PODCAST, and they will ship all the way around the world to you. It just means a lot to us. And being part of Nick Mason's Saucerful of Secrets US tour, the Echoes tour in 2022, was special for us. Loved Pink Floyd growing up. They were very important to us, not only as teenagers, but in our 20s, seeing them live, and then going to the show to represent Pantheon and to get to know some other rock fans. Just icing on the cake, really is. Being able to talk to Guy Pratt and Gary Kemp on our show was so much fun. And look, we could have talked to them for 4 hours if they had the time. But they were very generous of spirit, generous of time. We appreciate that. And listen, by the time you hear this, there aren't going to be many dates left on the Nick Mason Saucerful of Secrets tour. But if you have the chance, whether you're in Oakland or Seattle or Vancouver or maybe LA, definitely go see them. Don't miss it. It's a fantastic show. It's a lot of fun. If you like Pink Floyd at all, especially the early stuff, you're going to love this show. And I hope you like that little bit at the end where we kind of featured all of our guests, at least for the most part, giving a little snippet of, hey, this is Steve Hackett. Hey, this is Jeff Downs. Just so proud to be able to talk to some of those folks. And some of the feedback we've gotten from them and their reps is that we get it. We're not just journalist wonks who want to ask gotcha questions or ask the same dumb stuff over and over. We might actually have an interesting take on it, but a positive take. We are fans of these folks. We are fans of rock and roll. Doesn't mean we won't hold their feet to the fire or let them know when they do something we don't love, but we're trying to preserve this rock and roll that we love so much and get as many firsthand stories from the people who made it as possible. And spread the word on the stuff that we love. We know not everybody likes what we like. It's been that way our whole lives. Think about being in college when everybody's listening to Nirvana and you hate Nirvana, but you insist that people listen to a 20-year-old Rolling Stones album instead. How do you think that went over? Well, I didn't like grunge. Didn't like it at all. Maybe Alice in Chains, maybe a little Soundgarden, but that's about it. The rest of them, didn't like them then, don't like them now. I know what I like, and I'm happy to spread the word on it and talk to the folks who not only also love it, but the folks who made it. And hopefully that's what our show is and will continue to be for the next 100 episodes and beyond. So as usual, folks, you gotta let us know. Did we get something right? Did we get something wrong? Did we miss the point? Did we leave out your favorite part? You let us know. You email us, uglyamericanwerewolf@gmail.com. You can also tweet us at ugly_werewolf or at actionjack72. Find us on YouTube. Find us on Instagram. Subscribe and download wherever you get your podcasts. And know that we've got a lot of great guests coming up in the future. I think next week we're going to have another one, maybe someone who you don't know that well, but it's someone we'll be excited to introduce you to. So thanks again to everyone out there who has listened. Over 100 countries around the world, tens of thousands of downloads, hundreds of thousands of streams. We really appreciate your support. We want to know what you like. We want to know what you'd be interested in hearing us talk about, whether it's an album or a band or a concert, DVD, a book, whatever it is. Please let us know. And to all of you rock and rollers all around the world, be cool and stay safe.